G'day fellas, in this video we're going to talk about a brand new civilization that breaks the meta completely in the Sultan's Ascend expansion pack for Age of Empires 4, and that's the Zhu Xi Legacy. This civilization completely destroys the rock, paper, scissors format that you should be used to in strategy games of turtling, rushing, and booming. Let's get into it and explain why. The Zhu Xi Legacy is a variant civilization for the Chinese. And part of the reason why it's so strong is because of its speed in the early game. The build order that I'm using here is a 2 town center build order, which should mean that it's weak against civilizations that go for an early, powerful rush. I'm playing against Konoki. He's a pretty decent player, a Conqueror ranked player on the Japanese, another brand new civilization. Konoki's got a really good build order. In fact, I'll be featuring it in another video on this channel. And it's such a tight build order. I plan on using it once I hit the ranked ladder when I start playing the Japanese. But let's talk a little bit more about the Zhu Xi Legacy. This civilization has a number of significant bonuses that make it absolutely able to avoid any kind of aggression in the early game. The first one that you're going to be seeing is going to be the fact that your landmarks cost less, 15% less. Now, normally this wouldn't be a big deal, but the thing is, as the Zhu Xi Legacy, you're making 2 landmarks. And by making 2 landmarks, you're getting that bonus twice in a row. And that's huge, because it means that the speed of your civilization is really starting to move. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the build order that I'm doing here as well, just so that you can see it. I've started off with 7 villagers on food. I've put them out over onto the mill. We start off on berries, but we only take a little bit off the berries, and then we just move straight over to sheep. And then we're going to put 3 villagers out onto gold. Nice and simple. A pretty standard opening for most civilizations. And after those 3 villas are on gold, then we're just going to move our town center rally point back out over to sheep. So, with the Tang Dynasty reducing the cost of landmarks by 15%, it means that we're able to get a really quick Song Dynasty, much faster than the Chinese can do it. Much faster than any civilization can really gather that resources, and that's partly because of the Imperial Official and the fact that we get the Imperial Official for free at the beginning of the game, just partly because of the Zhu Xi Legacy mechanics and the Tang Dynasty in particular. So once we've got the Tang Dynasty all set up and we enter into the Song Dynasty, that's going to give us a couple of extra bonuses, but there's one specific bonus that is going to cover our early game completely, and that is the bonus from the Jiangnan Tower. Now, initially when I looked at this landmark, I said to myself, this landmark, it just doesn't seem very strong, right? It acts as a tax drop-off for Imperial officials, sure, but I receive a free unit at the tower when a barracks or archery range or stable is completed, and I receive a free villager when a town center is completed. So, to me, I was thinking, well, in the early game, I'm not really making a lot of barracks, I'm not really making a lot of archery range, I'm not really making a lot of stables. This doesn't really seem that valuable. Sure, it's a landmark and it helps me get into the Song Dynasty, but what does it really achieve? But there's a secret to this, because the bonus that it provides is twofold. And we'll get into that once we've aged up, and I'll demonstrate it for you. We'll talk a little bit about our placement of this landmark. So this landmark is called the Meditation Gardens. It provides a passive bonus depending on the resources that are nearby. And one of the things I love to do with this landmark is just take a look on the map and see where can I get the biggest bonus for this landmark. You know, normally when I'm going for a 2 TC build like this, I like to put it a little bit safer. And here I've just thrown it up in the back of my base. I've got access to the berries, I've got access to the stone, and I've got access to a little bit of wood. I'm just going to send 2 vills up there. At the same time, I'm still working towards my second landmark, which is about to come through. Once I've gathered up 170 gold over here, you can see I've done a beautiful job there. I'm going to rally these villagers over to wood because we want that town center. And I'm going to take 6 villagers and put them on stone, making sure that we always collect our gold with our Imperial Official so that we are making, so that we've always just got it in the back pocket. The age up comes through, and now we're going to be looking to put that Jiangnan Tower down very early on in the game. You can see this is not a bad age up time, 3 minutes 45, and now we're immediately just going into the Song Dynasty. But we're not really in a rush here to get the Song Dynasty, just simply because the town center, it's going to take time for it to get there. So, at this point, we've rallied out 3 villagers onto gold, or onto food rather, and all the rest of the villagers are going to be just running on straggler trees. We don't want to move over onto our wood lines just yet. We're happy doing straggler trees. And now we're going to be thinking about our second town center. But one thing to note is we're still very, very early in this game. 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Not a lot of people are aged up at that point. Whereas we're aged up, we have our second landmark, and we're on the way to our second town center. Now, Konoki making a little bit of a mistake here. Fortunately, we don't end up killing him because we're pretty far away from our town center, I say, as we're on the straggler trees. But essentially, we let him get away. We'll give him that one. Now, we're working towards that second TC. One of the things that you'll note is I've got a little bit of extra stone here over what I normally would, and that's because of our landmark here that's providing us passive stone. And that passive stone is something that you've got to kind of adjust for. To be honest, I prefer putting one less villager on stone when I've got that passive bonus, and you can see it trickling in there. So now, at 5 minutes and 4 seconds into the game, we hit our Song Dynasty, and that's going to reduce the cost. So just to pause it a little bit, talk about why this is so powerful and why this breaks the RTS system in general. It's because you're now reducing the cost of every single building you've got. So not only are you reducing the cost of your blacksmith down, so just let's show you what Song Dynasty does. Non-military buildings cost 40% less wood to construct. So that's your town centers, of course. That's the main thing that we're going for here. So it costs 240 wood instead of 400 wood. Your houses cost less. Your mills cost less. Your farms cost less. Hold on, I gotta get that right. Cost less. There we go. But on top of that, you've got things like blacksmith costing less and your granaries costing less. But there's one thing that's missing, and that's military buildings. And we can see that they do cost the full price here. 150, 150, 150, 150. But what if I told you that they don't? Actually, because you've got the Jiangnan Tower. And every time you build a barracks, an archery range, or a stable, you get that refunded back to you because you get a unit. Now, depending on which building you make, depends on which unit you get. But if you make a stable, you get a horseman. And a horseman costs 120 resources. So you're only spending 30 wood on getting that stable. And as I mentioned before, you don't really build a lot of military production in the early game. Except if you're not very good at the game. And this is where I think this civilization has the potential to take people through the ranks incredibly quickly because of what I'm about to demonstrate. So, our second TC, it's coming up. We didn't move our Imperial Official, that's okay. So we're going to be looking to throw down our second TC just right behind our first one. We don't want it to die. If our enemy pushes in with a ram, we don't want it to die. And this TC comes up at 5 minutes 20. Not a bad timing for a second TC considering we're already in Song Dynasty. Now, one of the most common strategies for the Japanese at this stage seems to be a bit more of a defensive opening, but I am aware Kanoki's a pretty aggressive player, so my main focus early on is just getting up a barracks because I want to make sure that I've got spearmen just in case he goes for an I think it's an Bannerman rush, which is quite common, or quite a common strategy that he'll play as the Japanese. So we've got our second TC up, and we're training villagers out of both of it. We're looking to balance our resources here. And I'm going to speed it up a little bit here, because we are... Well, there you go. You can see that Bannerman comes in, and immediately... So it's about 6 minute mark, so it's a little bit late on where it should be. But our spearman arrives. And now our spearman is going to cover our early game, because now we've got a second spearman. And for anybody who's played against the French and knows how powerful a knight could be, it's the exact same thing with an Bannerman. These guys have got a charge. These guys do a fair bit of damage. And against one spearman, that's a problem. But against two spearmen, it's not. They can easily defeat it. And that's where this unit, or this civilization, breaks that rock, paper, scissors, because you're able to have out units very early to counter your opponent. Now, I'm sure I can already hear those people saying, okay, but Drongo, at this point in the game, it's still early on. All of the resources that Kanoki's got are going to be going into units only. Absolutely everything is just going to be making horsemen, he's going to be making archers, all that good stuff, and you're 100% right. It is true. But this is where the system gets broken. And that is because I can now balance my economy around this mechanic. Let me explain. Typically, players that aren't very good at Age of Empires, and I'm just going to pause it here because this is really important that I get this across. Players that aren't very good at Age of Empires 4 will often float resources, which means that they've got a lot of resources in the bank, more than what they should. In a perfect world, you're spending all of your resources as soon as you've got them. The moment that you get those resources, you're putting them out into units, into buildings, whatever that case might be. The reason why this civilization breaks that is because now all of a sudden, instead of having, say, 1 barracks and 1 archery range, I've got 4 barracks and 4 archery range because I built them early on, because my macro isn't very good, because I had too much wood. And you can see here right now, I've got a lot of wood. But there's a part of that that's intentional as well. And what that's going to do is it's going to mean later on in the game, when my enemy is attacking me and I might forget to make units, I've got lots of military production facilities and I can immediately pump out those units and have them there to reinforce. Instead of waiting for them to do it, I'm able to just get those units out immediately. Now we see the next component of why this civilization is broken. And this is what I like to call the English effect. As this civilization, you don't need to leave your base. I can stay inside my base for the next 30 minutes and live a happy life. And the reason why is because I'm paying so little for these granaries. These granaries together with the farms are cheaper than English farms. Now, I know you might be looking at this and saying, well, Drongo, it says 45 wood on this farm. It doesn't say 36 wood on the farm, and the English farm is 37 wood. So how could you possibly justify these farms as cheaper than the English? And the answer is this little guy right here, the Imperial Official. Now, I'm not supervising that lumber camp right now, but I can tell you damn well what. I'm going to be supervising it very soon. And when that happens, it means I'm going to have an extra 20% resources coming in from it. And with that extra 20%, what that means is that instead of collecting 10 wood, I'm collecting 12 wood. And that brings down the effective cost of my farms from 45 wood down to 36. I've got cheaper farms than the English. I have a higher gather rate than the English. Keep in mind that the granary bonus does stack. It gives you 10% from each of your granaries. So if you build 3 of them, that's 30% bonus that you're getting. And it's a pretty decent AoE that's coming through as well. So now all of a sudden you've got better farms, cheaper farms. And, get this, you've got the English gold bonus in the Dark Age. Of course, it's the Imperial Official collecting the tax. Look at this. I've just got free gold right now. I've got a gold mine out here. I'm not even interested in it. I don't even need it. I've got all the gold that I need right now from my Imperial Official. Now you can see we're going to start supervising up this wood line. And that's going to mean that we're going to be pumping up our wood. And this is where I get a little bit worried. So I think I moved forward with my scout. You could hear him call out. And I did see that our enemy had gone for a double archery range. So naturally, my response to that is just to throw down a lot of production. Because when I throw down these stables, what's going to happen is my horseman is going to come out for free. And essentially, all I'm paying is 30 wood for this stable. And I'm also future-proofing myself so that if my macro isn't perfect, I'm going to be easily forgiven, and it's going to cover my weakness. And it's because of that one reason that I think this civilization really has the opportunity to push people up quite a high rank. Now, I genuinely expect this civilization to get nerfed. I think it is absolutely busted. At the moment, I think it's only Puppy Paw who really agrees with me that it's completely broken. I think it's going to take time for all the pros to sort of catch on. Or who knows? Maybe I'm completely wrong. I've been wrong before about balance, but I suspect, just judging from the timings of this civilization, the fact that you can get all of these military units out so quickly. And let's just take a look at the military count at the moment. So you can see it's 21 versus 21. So it's relatively balanced. And that's largely because of this bonus in the early game. So we've got an extra 5 units because of that. So that kind of brings us up to parity. And here we're going to start throwing down more military production buildings. And remember that all of those resources that our enemy was throwing into units, we're throwing it into production because we've got that big economy. And we're going to be able to transition that into units eventually. But in the meantime, we're just going to get free units from our Jiangnan Tower. And this landmark is just pulling out insane amounts of resources. So already we're 11 minutes through the game. And we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 production buildings. Or 7 production buildings. So if that's 100 resources on each one of those units. We're talking about 700 resources that have come through so far. That's not too bad. That's not too bad considering it's probably been up for about 6 minutes. Not to mention the meditation gardens, which is just absolutely broken as well. So we continue transitioning at this stage into more and more farms. We've got those super cheap farms, and behind this, what we're looking to do is just make sure that we're safe from all angles. We just want to try and shut down the enemy. The game plan here isn't to go and attack the enemy and kill the enemy and go, haha. Instead, the game plan is to just wait out the enemy. And at the end of the day, know that you've got the power economy, you've got that 30% bonus on your farms, and keep in mind that's on top of your horticulture. So you've got 15% plus the 30%. Plus, on top of that, if you really want to, you can supervise the granaries as well to get an extra 20%, which is multiplicative instead of additive. And that's huge because now you're multiplying all of those bonuses together. But that's something that I'll leave open to you, and you can see we've got those upgrades coming through now. But we're starting to really build up our production numbers here, and this is where that system is broken. So let's talk a little bit about that. The idea is simple. A person who's focusing on their economy is going to lose to someone who's focusing on their military. A person who's focusing on their military is going to lose to someone who's focusing on their defenses. And a person who's focusing on their defenses is going to lose to someone who's focusing on their economy. That's essentially the turtle versus rushing versus booming. I guess you'd call it the what do they call it in MMOs, like the triangle, where you got like healers, tanks, and DPS. It's that same kind of concept, the golden triangle, I guess. And it's the same sort of theory here. And the reason why Zhu Xi's legacy breaks that is because if you do go for an economic route into 2 town centers, you're not susceptible to rushes. At no point in this early game was I ever susceptible to aggression. Now, sure, there's always going to be that one guy who says, but Drongo, if an English player had just sent a men-at-arms to your gold, it would have been a completely different game. And yeah, you're 100% right. But the reality is, that's not going to affect the overarching outcome of the game, because there are other mechanisms to it, and realistically, you can be flexible. And it depends on your level. Don't get me wrong. If you're playing at the gold league and someone sends a men-at-arms to your gold, the game's probably over. At the Conqueror level, it's a much different outcome. There's ways that you can play around it. So at this point, I'm starting to feel a little antsy. I'm saying, where is he? Get him in here. We're 13 minutes in. There should have been an attack by now, and I realize why. He never had an opportunity to attack. He was able to spot my army and said, that's a ludicrous size army, and you can just see how big our army is at this point. Keep in mind, we're up 20 villages. There's meant to be an investment period for this civilization, or for any 2TC strategy. There's meant to be an investment period where you're behind on military. When you look at the army value, they're relatively close, but 500 of that is going to be your battering ram. So technically, I'm ahead on the military value with the exception of those battering rams. But now, he's going to look to push in. We have some pretty decent micro here, but I don't even really think micro mattered considering we've got the defender's advantage, we've got the big TC behind it ready to just take some big shots, and we've just got Zhugunu, not to mention we've got palace guards. I haven't even brought the palace guards to the party just yet. I figured it's kind of like the English men-at-arms. You want to wait a little bit later before you can get into it. But at this point, I'm confident at this point that the game is just completely over. I've got the 2 town center advantage. My economy is scaling. I've got a huge army, double the opponent at this point, and I've just won convincingly in this fight. And at this point, it's safe for me to go Castle Age if I want to. There's a number of ways that you can play it from here. You can look to continue expanding out the economy, which is something that I do. You can go Castle Age and look to pick up relics, or you can look to play in Feudal Age a little bit longer. You can see my enemy hasn't really walled up, so they'd be susceptible to a Palace Guard on the gold or a Palace Guard on the berries. There's lots of different ways that we could look to attack them. But for me, the safest option is just to stay in your base, go Castle Age, and what you want to do is, at this point, just rush double upgrades on your Zhukunu. We've got 34 Zhukunu. It's a lovely number of Zhukunu. That's a lot of damage that's coming out. And essentially what we want to do is make sure we're always just doing these little attacks on our enemy, just dwindling or twiddling down. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Whittling down their army and just being annoying to them. But we never want to really engage in the fight because we are considering that age up. Manages to put all of the units in the battering ram, but we're going to fall back here. We're going to go Castle Age. And we are going to look for the double upgrade. So the double upgrades, what am I talking about? I'm talking about +2 ranged attack, and I'm talking about our veterancy on the Zhugunu. So let's speed it up a little bit here, because our age up is about to come through. And we always want to make sure that we don't age up with our gold villagers, because we want them to collect gold during the transition period so that we've got enough to age up, or so that we've got enough to research technologies once we're aged up. And now at the 15-minute mark, after winning, and just take a look at how much we've set up the economy here. We've got a fair decent amount of farms back here. We're sitting on 22 farms at the moment. And what are we doing? We're getting our double upgrades in. We're getting our balanced projectiles. We're getting veterancy on the Zhukunu, and we're supervising both of them. This is because as soon as you hit Castle Age, your enemy is going to start pushing you. It doesn't matter what or how the position of the game is. They know that if you get those upgrades through, that's it. They can't do anything because you're just going to push with upgraded units. So what do we want to do? We want to avoid fighting until those upgrades come in. And you can see they're about to come in right now because we're supervising them. And there's veterancy, there's +2, and as you would predict, we absolutely destroy the fight. But for me, this civilization is completely busted, just simply because it breaks that concept of a triangular system where the rush beats the boom and the boom beats the turtle. The Zhu Xi legacy beats everything. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. I'll catch you guys in the next one. There's going to be plenty more videos on the Zhu Xi legacy because I genuinely think this civilization is completely busted, and I do think it's going to be the next English. It might be a 3-star difficulty civ, but once you know the basics, you'll absolutely shred the ladder with it.